What's up, everybody? We're back at it here. It's Monday, probably nighttime when you're watching this, but I got a ton of messages over the weekend about this motion to sever. The hearing was had at the end of last week for Chad Daybell, who, of course, wants to sever his case from his wife, Vallow Daybell, for these murder charges coming in. We've talked about the reasons why in the motion, but some new reasons seem to have come out in this hearing. We got some questions answered about whether either side, the state or the defense, has any information about a confession. Has anybody confessed in this case? What is this evidence that is so different that rises to the level of severing these trials into two separate trials, costing all that time and money to the state? But also in this hearing, a very good alternative was mentioned that we're going to discuss that has been used before, and I actually think may be the perfect compromise in this case. So thanks for joining in with us. I'm Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, real personal injury and criminal defense lawyer in Tampa Bay, Florida, breaking down these cases for all of you. You choose the content. If you like this content, hit that like button. If you guys haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and let me know. Follow me here at Tragos Law on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, because that's where we get a lot of discussion going back and forth. The messages and the timelines, things like that, and to where I can see the content that so many of you want to know about, want me to break down, and this was one of them. So we are going to listen to a recap by the reporter who's in the courtroom instead of listening to the hour of just audio, because as you know, no cameras in this courtroom. The judge has shut that down, but we still get audio and we still get these little quick breakdowns from this reporter that's always in there from the East Idaho News. So let's check it out together.
Morning, everybody. Afternoon, depending on where you're watching. I am in Rexburg. I hope you don't mind me being in the car. It's a little cold outside, so I came inside the car. I've actually just written a story that's about to go up on eastidahonews.com about what happened this morning at the Daybell hearing. Considering other Daybell hearings, this one was relatively short. It was about an hour, and Chad Daybell's attorney argued that the cases should be severed, that Chad should have a separate trial from Lori. And he, of course, filed a motion back in September that was pretty lengthy, I think over 30 pages, detailing his reasonings as to why he wants the cases severed. A few bullet points that came out of the hearing, some of the headlines. John Pryor said that Chad's defense will be, quote, diametrically different than Lori's. And her
diametrically different. Okay. So in a major way, Daybell's defense is going to be different than Lori Vallow's. There's only a few ways you can actually do that, right? He's not telling us what the strategy is or what the differences will be, but either I had no clue, I wasn't there, she was planning this in the background, she lied to me, pointing the finger at her, or neither of us were there would seem to be not diametrically opposed, right? If neither of us were there, we were together, we don't know what happened, we were in a different state, we were in a different country, whatever, that would be right in line together in lockstep as defenses. But instead, they're diametrically opposed, which means he has to say, we were in separate places. He could even say, I don't know where Lori was. All I know is where I was, and I was not there. I couldn't have done it. It couldn't have been me, even though it was on my properties where they were found. So it's very interesting because there can only be certain things that make it diametrically opposed.
Defense team, that they will be completely different. Whatever Chad's defense to these murder charges, it's going to be different than Lori's. And he wanted to make that point to the judge that the defense is not the same on both sides, and that with Alex being a co-conspirator, allegedly, well, he's no longer here, he's dead now, there could be some issues. And Pryor said that his client, Chad, has a right to have his own trial.
If you're going to bring in a co-conspirator, even if they're no longer with us, and they are the brother of one of the defendants, that's pretty damning. That looks pretty bad. So that alone to me seems like a pretty good reason to separate them. If Alex is going to be brought into this, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's brother, who is implicated in lots of things, right? So if he's a co-conspirator and he is someone's brother. We've seen this with the Markel case, and the whole family's getting involved, and it's this web tied up. That alone to me seems like a pretty good interest of justice as to why Chad Daybell would not want to be tied to Lori Vallow throughout this murder trial.
Separate from Lori's, separate from his wife's. So that was one of the key things. Now, the prosecution objects to the severance. They say that there is a heavy burden on the defense as to why the judge should sever the cases, and that they argue that the defense has not met that burden, and that it's more efficient to have a joint trial because the witnesses are the same. It helps with resources as far as money is concerned from the court and the government and the witnesses. Lindsay Blake actually said that the witnesses and evidence will be similar, if not identical.
So that's interesting, right? The witnesses and evidence will be similar, if not identical. Now, just because the evidence against these two defendants is going to be identical does not mean their defenses have to be identical. So both of these statements can be true. The defendants can have two totally separate defenses and arguments, while the state could have the same exact evidence. And we'll get to what might be a good compromise for that. Although not perfect. And again, to me, I would fear an appeal for Chad Daybell if this really does start centering around Lori Vallow, her family, her connections, and really her, and he gets kind of swooped in with her, which who knows if that's how the evidence will come out. But something that's interesting is people have asked me, so do they keep track of this? And does the judge get mad if they lied? And Chad Daybell actually comes out and his defense is very similar to Lori Vallow and not diametrically opposed to Lori Vallow? Or does the judge get mad at the state if they bring evidence that's different against Chad Daybell and different against Lori Vallow, but they said it was going to be almost identical or almost exactly the same, and it wasn't? The answer for the most part is no. You're not really held to this. You're not punished afterwards, especially if you're the criminal defendant. You have a lot more rights and a lot more leeway as the criminal defendant. Now, it could be an issue for an appeal if the state argues this in this hearing, that everything is basically the same or identical, as they said, and it turns out they are not, and there are major differences. You better believe this is going to be something that Chad Daybell has in his appeal. So it is an appellate issue from the state's point of view and from the state side if they don't do what they say. But the criminal defendants have a little more leeway, and they can always change their strategy in defense, and they can say that, judge, since you put these two cases together, we had to kind of audible what our defense was, and therefore it would have been diametrically opposed if we would have had separate trials, but not because we're in the same trial. So those kind of arguments are still available to the defense, but they usually are not for the prosecution, because this usually goes the prosecution's way, and the case doesn't sound like it's going to be severed. So the prosecution better not have two majorly different ways and points to attack these two defendants. They better be almost identical
in both of the trials. And she suggested that if they need, one solution could be have the trials together, but have two juries in there. One jury could be Chad's jury. One jury could be Lori's jury.
So this is the compromise. Have one jury that is only there to look at Chad Daybell, and they're not going to make any decisions on Lori Vallow. And one jury that's only there to think about Lori Vallow and not Chad Daybell. Now, this can help, because while the state is convincing a jury that Lori Vallow is in fact guilty, and Lori Vallow's lawyers are arguing that she is not guilty to that jury, Chad Daybell's jury should really just be focusing on Chad Daybell and what they can prove and how they can connect Chad Daybell to these murders. So this is a compromise that would be better, in my opinion, than just one jury to determine both of these defendants' fate. Now, it's not a perfect solution, but it is better than the alternative of only one jury. If I'm Chad Daybell, I'm still fighting for a severed trial, and I think that's actually the most fair way to make sure that they are both convicted on the merits of what they did and their actions, and not guilty by association.
And if there was certain evidence or witnesses or issues that affected one and not the other, you could dismiss the one jury during that particular portion of the trial. So
it's a really interesting compromise, right? And that's why I think that is actually a much better option than just having one jury. It's a little bit more expensive, but not as expensive as doing the trial twice, right? We would have to have two juries if we did the trial twice. So it's no more juries that way. So we're saving time. We're saving money. This trial would be a little bit longer just because of logistics, but it wouldn't be twice as long as if you have to do the trial twice, right? So it is somewhat of a good compromise.
Judge Boyce did not issue a ruling today. This is a capital murder case. And prior, Chad's attorney mentioned that there should be some sort of severance, because he said that That is what happens in most cases. So we will see what the judge rules. As I mentioned, the hearing was about an hour. Couple members of the public there. Rexburg police detectives were there. Fremont County detectives were there. We of course were not allowed to have a camera in there. Chad was wearing a white shirt, dark red tie. Before the hearing started, he and John Pryor were chatting, and Chad actually he started to giggle. He started to laugh. I've never seen him really smile like that, but it was audible to the point that I was a few rows back and could hear him laughing. I don't know what the joke was about, but he and John were laughing, kind of joking a bit. But then once the hearing started, he was completely serious. We have requested audio of the hearing so that you all can listen. Hopefully we'll have that soon, maybe today, hopefully tomorrow.
That's actually up on the YouTube page if you want to hear the entire audio of the hearing.
Attorney, the big point today, he said that their defense will be diametrically different than Lori's. It will be completely different. Whatever their defenses are, they're going to be different. Also, Judge Boyce did ask Pryor and the prosecution if they know of any confessions from either side, and the prosecution and John Pryor said no.
And that's interesting because you have to tell them if you have it, and there aren't any on either side, from any party, from any witness, from anybody. No confessions that either part's going to use.
So as of now, there are no recorded confessions that either side knows of. It's not like Chad has a confession or Lori has a confession to committing these crimes. And that's what they said. So the story will be up shortly on eastidahonews.com. And I'll give you a quick update on Lori. Lori, yesterday there was a competency hearing, but it was closed to the public. So we don't know what happened there. That was not discussed today during court. Her attorneys were there. John Thomas and Jim Archibald were there. They didn't say anything. They sat, kind of in the audience with everybody else.
But it's interesting, and they should be there because this could affect Lori's case, and they may be making arguments to sever or not to sever, and they need to know what happens at these hearings. So that stuff is all really important for her lawyers to be there protecting her rights as well. It is interesting, though, to see how all this is going to continue if she's found to not be competent.
But we don't know what happened in that competency hearing, and we will wait and see. We'll wait and see what the judge says, and we don't have a trial date yet. We will see if that is set soon too. All right. That's the update on the Daybell trial. There's no further hearings scheduled at this point. I imagine there'll be one in December if there's some motions out there. We did get some video of Chad leaving the courtroom. He was in a bulletproof vest. He didn't say anything. It was a short walk from the courthouse over to the jail. And now that's where he's at. Okay. I just grabbed lunch. I'm going to eat lunch.
All right. So that's the update on what's going on in this case. And there's no trial date. And we don't know if Lori's not competent to stand trial. But if she's not, I think that adds fuel to Chad Daybell's severance fire, because he cannot possibly be made to wait until she is found competent to know his fate while he sits in prison under the presumption of innocence, right? It is not guilty until proven innocent. It's innocent until proven guilty. So he needs and deserves his day in court, regardless of what we or you or anybody thinks about him. He deserves his day in court. So he needs to get that. He can't just sit there and wait for her to be found competent by the court or by medical professionals at that point. So we'll see. We'll continue to follow this. Let me know what your questions are in the comments and in the chat below. And I will try to get to a lot of them. You can let me know on social media like a lot of you have as well at Tragos Law. Hit that like button on your way out. And thanks for joining us tonight.